All right, today we begin the third part of the course. The first part, you remember, dealt with questions related to your reading in my book, The Pursuit of Love. The second, dealing with the myths of love in the case of two famous myths, Don Juan and Tristan and Isolde. And today we go into a different dimension because your reading will be coming out of my recent book, Explorations in Love and Sex. And at the time that book was published, 3 years ago, it was the most advanced state of my philosophy about love. So it fits into the course, and I'm eager to know what you think of it. Two things. First, notice that I said the latest stage. There are at least two reasons for that. One of which is that as time goes on, my thinking changes. I get new ideas. And second, because I don't believe that there is any single big idea about the nature of love that I am willing to espouse as my philosophy. That's a view that comes from the rationalist tradition, in which life is thought to be a problem, and it's the job of the philosopher to deal with that problem at its deepest levels. I don't think life is a problem, and in terms of a deep level, that varies a great deal with the circumstances and with the individual. If somebody is dying of cancer, it's a deep problem to get the right medication, to find something that will keep him alive or her alive, which will vary from period to period, and the more difficult questions about the meaning of life or what the meaning of death is will not have the same kind of immediate importance. So it's very hard to know just what's meant by the deeper problems that philosophers are supposed to deal with. In any event, if you mean by that the traditional problems about the origin of being, the nature of being, I don't find those problems very interesting. For me, the question is the Socratic one: how to live, how to make sense of one's life, how to recognize the fact that there isn't any single solution because different people from different points of view have a different meaning in their lives and make sense in different ways. So that my kind of philosopher is more empirical, less rationalistic, more pluralistic in the sense that he or she doesn't expect to find a single answer, and more investigatory. Also, in my particular case, the investigation proceeds on the nature of my own talents, which is mainly as an esthetician, somebody who is sensitive to the immediacy of life, particularly as represented by works of art. So for me, philosophy becomes a work of art, expressing one's own point of view, but in ways that will be meaningful to other people, and that will vary from stage to stage of one's artistic development. As you all know about great artists, they're never the same at the end as they are at the beginning. It's not that they've gone any further, it's just that they have developed in that direction, or if they weren't in that direction, it wouldn't be at the end. And some people will say, oh, what a pity, his great period was his middle period, and others will say, oh no, it's his last period. Think of the music of Beethoven. The last quartets are considered to be the greatest quartets ever written, and also a level of profundity that Beethoven had never reached before. So much so that they're said to be more spiritual. Well, in some way they are more spiritual in a traditional way, but I think of them being more spiritual in my sense of the word spirit, which is that spirit is that part of nature which belongs to us as human beings aspiring to get beyond nature, aspiring to satisfy values and ideals that are very important to us as human beings. Where do those values and ideals come from? Not beyond nature, but rather from within our nature in the pluralistic way that I keep talking about, of each of us trying to make sense of the world in a way that will matter to us, and if we're lucky, will matter to other people. I see that in Beethoven, ascribing all that to the religion he held, which is very unclear. He wrote traditional religious music, and some of it the church can accept as being authentic. But in his own feelings, what I find more representative is the sense of humanity that he expresses in his one opera, and a great opera, one of the greatest operas, but the only one he wrote, called Fidelio, which is all about political prisoners being liberated. Could have been written during the Second World War, and the tyrants being overcome because of married love. Florestan is a political prisoner in a dungeon, and his wife, Leonora, transvestites, dressed herself up as a boy in order to get a job in the jail, and finally she succeeded in finding him, Florestan, and liberating him from the jail keeper who was a tyrant who was about to murder him. So that it's political, social, and very much concerned about married love. It's a great opera, one of the few great operas about married love, especially interesting because Beethoven never got married, always wanted to, but never could find the right woman. Let me just finish this slight digression. After he died, one of his great friends, the poet Grillparzer, made a talk at the burial, and he said of Beethoven, he was a unique individual. He could never find anyone like himself, and that's why he never married. So that one has built into that a whole romantic conception about the nature of marriage, which is not untrue to Beethoven's ideas and his own experience. It's in that period, in that kind of work, that I find Beethoven at his most spiritual, or a different kind of spirituality from the last quartets or the religious oratorios that he wrote. Now this is related to the fact that what I was saying was that the book that you're reading for the next few weeks, Explorations in Love and Sex, merely represents the state that I was at when that book was published. It's not that I've renounced most of that. Some of it I've thought through, but I've gone beyond it in ways that we'll be talking about. One way, just briefly, is in terms of the fundamental category of creativity, which pervades all my writings about love, and which I've never been able to write about in a way that satisfies me, and that I'm now trying to write about in a book that I hope to write called The Nature of Creativity, so that I'm different from what I was then. And it isn't that I'm closer to the truth. I'm further along in my own development, which may be of no use to the universe. Future generations, people may never have heard of me, or else they may pick up something and say, oh, this is interesting, and then they'll have their development. But it isn't as if there will be one final answer. As I think I may have mentioned to you, another book I wrote at that time called Feeling and Imagination. This is, they came out in 2001. I know that Adriana has looked at the book because she mentioned it in her first paper. In that book, the concluding chapter tries to argue that there is no answer, there is no everything that we could find knowledge of, because we don't even know what we're looking for, and we don't know what that everything would consist in. That is fundamental in the kind of pluralism that I have been developing and that you're now reading. All right, so that's the preface to the status, so to speak, of the reading for today. Another point about that is I singled out the long chapter called Praise and Bestowal Revisited. Isn't that what the title I gave it? It was, it's related, you know, you're Look it up. Isn't that how it is? Nature and what is it? The Nature and Pursuit of Love Revisited. A lot of it deals with appraisal and bestowal. You've read the book called The Pursuit of Love, and then the references to The Nature of Love, the trilogy which preceded The Pursuit of Love that I haven't asked you to read. And this is a revisiting. It's a revisiting on the occasion of that 3-day symposium about my work. But above all, it's more accurately titled, as it was in the proceedings of that symposium, a reply to my critics and friendly commentators. The reason I'm calling attention to that is, in the process of giving that reply, I have to confront problems that are real, important, because other people raise them. And therefore, I couldn't simply ignore them. These were problems that I often hadn't thought of, and it's not very clear that they're always relevant to what I'm doing, but I try very hard to make sense of the questions and the criticisms from the point of view of the person who's making them, and I try harder still to rethink every bit of my theorization in relation to these criticisms that I was lucky enough to get. The result is that this is, I think, some of my best analytical, that is, less poetic and less freewheeling writing than some of the best of that sort that I've done. I had to be analytical because I had to be precise about what they were saying, and since they were talking about specific issues, I had to investigate them, those issues, precisely. Analytical philosophy is a way of doing philosophy as if you were writing a contract, so that you have to analyze everything you say in view of any possibility of misinterpretation or occurrence, varied occurrences in the world. You can't let your spirit soar in order to make grand generalizations that might be harder to make detailed and explicit. That's the glory of contemporary 20th century, 21st century analytical philosophy. And it's the prevalent way of doing philosophy, not only in this department, but in the American Philosophical Association as a whole. I'm on the peripheries of that because though I was trained as an analytical philosophy, as you know, my writing is very often not like that, and I move across various fields. So writing this, I had to think as an analytical philosopher. I had to benefit from these criticisms, some of which were excellent, and I had to make revisions and amplifications. And for instance, in the question of bestowal, I think this is the more complete expression of bestowal than anything you've read previously in this course. And at the same time, I have to confess, as I do, that it's a very difficult idea, and I'm not surprised my critics have misunderstood me and that they have lingering problems with that. The case of Van Oy is a good instance of that, but it's true throughout. And that is the reason why I wanted to start your reading in the book Explorations, Love and Sex with that, rather than that chapter, rather than anything else. All right. Instead of one of you doing the presentation today, I said that I would do so. You can stop me at any point, and this might be a good point. Just in any order, or any random way, what among the critics, who among the critics do you think was most telling, and what did you find more interesting in this wholly different arena of philosophizing from what you've been reading?
I was kind of intrigued to know more about Vinoy, and so you say his view is kind of like Freud, right? That love reduces fundamentally to appraisal.
On my interpretation of Freud,
Okay.
by the time Van Noy worked out his view, he had already read my book on the trilogy, The Nature of Love, and knew my ideas about Freud, and that's what he picked up in order to develop that aspect of my thinking in criticism of my trying to go beyond it by including bestowal. He thought that the soul could be reduced to appraisal. It's a fair criticism. Let me tell you a little about the history of this. The book, the only book I think that Van Noy wrote, I say wrote, and as if, well, he may have written more, but I haven't heard of them. And I'm not even sure that he's still alive. I haven't heard much about him. In any event, the only book he wrote that I know of is called Sex Without Love, a Philosophical Exploration, I think it is. Is that the title? All right. That came out in the 1980s and is very hard-hitting in the sense of being very analytical. Oh, why don't you open the door?
Sorry. Excuse me. Sorry. No problem.
And in it he argues, he has two sections. One is called On the Philosophy of Sex, and the other is on the Philosophy of Love. And his own thesis is that sex is better without love rather than with love, and it isn't love that provides the basis for the goodness in sex. Well, the title is almost self-explanatory. At the end of the part of the book, the last few chapters, last half, on the philosophy of love, he has a chapter called something, I forget the exact title, Four Philosophers of Love, colon, Plato, pretty sure it's Plato, Sartre, is it Freud? I think it might be Freud. I'm not sure who who are those? Did anyone happen to look at that? Oh, Schopenhauer. I think it's Plato, Schopenhauer, Sartre, and Singer. You know, who could ask for anything more? And he's very respectful of Singer, which is more than Singer deserves. And he also formulates in an early version the thesis of bestowal being reducible to appraisal. He also argues that I am internally inconsistent because I keep emphasizing the aesthetic quality and character of love, and he thinks that means that instead of really bestowing anything, I'm using the I'm thinking of the love object as a work of art, and therefore not accepting him or her at his or her face value, and therefore not bestowing. So he has various complaints about the concept of imagination in my philosophy of love, which is already formulated in the first volume of the trilogy. In the much later book, Feeling and Imagination, I have a chapter on imagination because I too felt I hadn't done the subject, hadn't done it well enough, and therefore it needed further explorations. And then when I started, I found all sorts of new things that I could never have thought of before. And that's what went into that chapter. But Van Noy has criticisms of the fundamental concept of imagination as it appears in the first volume of the trilogy. And I forget what other criticisms, but these are big criticisms. And he argues them very well. At that time, the third volume of the Nature of Love trilogy hadn't yet come out, And in that, I introduced a 10 or 15 page rebuttal of Van Ooy's attack on me, and going minutely through his points and showing how he misunderstands my position. But if I were to go back to it now, and I haven't looked at that for some time, I find that looking at my older writing gets in the way of my doing newer writing. I bet I would find ways in which my thought had changed and developed thanks to his criticism. Anyhow, I was happy to have it and to be able to reformulate in the present what I had said in a more preliminary way in the past. As you know from the reading of this chapter in Explorations in Love and Sex, the paper of Van Ooy's that was submitted for the symposium answers my critique, goes beyond it, and renews his, in greater detail, much more carefully, and I'm proud that I contributed to that, his view about bestowal being reducible to appraisal. And then in my reply, as you see, I was sorry to see that he didn't directly reply to me, but went ahead and presented his own view, which is all right, and that's what I dealt with in my reply. All right, so that's Van Ooy, since you mentioned in the background of Van Ooy. It's a long preliminary to your point, which you can now present.
I mean, I guess you wrote about this senior prom scenario that it sounds like he presented, right? And I mean, I don't know, I guess I'm curious the context in which he seriously presented that, because it seems like a silly and like extremely simplistic view.
Didn't seem silly to me. I tried very, very hard to be fair in representing the position of the people I was answering, on the assumption that that symposium would not be read, but possibly if I could rework my reply, it will belong to a book of mine, and people who might be interested in me wouldn't want to slog their way through that very long other book of the papers of the other people. That's a kind of egoistic point of view of mine. Why should they not do so? Maybe those people are worth reading more than I am. In any event, I tried very hard to present their position so that anyone could follow what I was dealing with and that I would be accurate. And I didn't think at the time that what Van Ooy was saying was so unprofitable. Certainly it was helpful to me, getting me to answer him the way I did. Tell me why you think it is.
Well, I think maybe the views of appraisal in that case aren't necessarily so unrealistic in terms of like high school seniors, right? But I don't think that like all forms of human love like reduce to like examples of that scenario.
Well, why? I'm sometimes, being a philosopher, one means that you don't know what you believe at any one moment, and you're free to change because the problems are so difficult and all possible answers must be so ambiguous. And at times I feel, maybe they're right. Maybe it's all appraisal. Why? Because putting myself into the position of a teenager, trying to remember what I was like, would I go for the ugly girls? I'd go for the most beautiful. Would I go for somebody that the others considered icky, or whatever you call it nowadays, yicky? No, I would go for the cheerleader, the one who attracted everyone's attention, who was most flamboyant, and all the other boys. That's another thing, the competitive element. It's not just a matter of the one who looks to me appraisively most desirable, but the one who is desired, which gives her an appraisal value. It's a social appraisal, and therefore just to be competitive, successful competitively. That's be the girl I would really want to get close to. Yeah.
I feel that I have to agree with him that seems kind of like something that a teenager does, and that actually what you're doing there is not loving the cheerleader, but bestowing love upon yourself because you want to seem like a greater person amongst your peers. So you're not actually, like, there's nothing to say that you would actually be able to love that person, but it's more of a selfish trying to say, I want the one that everyone else also wants.
That's a very good point, because, shall I answer first? Or Stavros?
I just want to say it's not always about high school teenagers, okay, so after you grow up.
Oh, wait, I think the camera might have trouble with you. Project your voice a little.
Okay, it's not always about, okay, when you're a teenager, you go after the cheerleader and stuff, but it's not like that thing stops after high school. Like when you're in the 20s, you also look, obviously, for beauty, but you look for, who's smart and stuff. It's just the values you look for change, but the beauty, but again, you're going against your peers. It's the rules of the game are the same, I think. It's just the qualities you look for might be a little different. But it doesn't mean that when you're like 25, you don't still feel antagonistic to the rest of your peers. Matter.
There is also a phenomenon that I find pervasive in human nature, and that Plato was the first really to capitalize on, which is that people always want what is good. If you go to a restaurant, you don't order the worst tasting or worst cooked meal. You want the very best. If you are confronted with different articles of food, let's say, on the table, inevitably you're going to choose the very best. In my family life, this was often a big problem for me, because as the father, I felt, no, I should leave the better food for the children. I have 4 children, so they will gobble it all up. Even if I'm given first choice, should I choose the apple that looks best, or should I choose the one that looks least, on the assumption the children should have what is best? And this, for me, was a source of conflict. I naturally, left to myself, if I were at a restaurant given a choice, I would choose the very best. That is built into us as purposive creatures, and that's what Plato understood extremely well, on the basis of his whole metaphysics, which ends up with the ultimate form of the highest form being the good, not the mediocre, not the least good. And so that would be a natural reaction, just acting from one's own selfish point of view. The question then is love contrary to that? Is love something that takes one beyond one's selfishness, which is what you're now raising? The difference between acting selfishly and acting out of love. The question is, how are the two related? Whether acting out of love, which is not selfish, is part of one's self-love, which is the view even of Plato. Plato says, for reasons of self-love, we should not be selfish, because we all want to be as good as we can, and that means often resisting our selfishness. So that there is a kind of selfishness, you might call it, which is self-love, but it's so different from ordinary selfishness, it's got to be a different category, and that is more related to the nature of love than ordinary selfishness. In the question of the cheerleader, it isn't just that you want to have selfishly to have the most desired person available, woman in this male-oriented example. It's because love consists in that. That's the view of Vannoy. The basis of my criticism, as I understand it, is that people are complex, and it's an ambivalent situation, and so we have to find a way of accommodating both of these tendencies. And sure enough, appraisal applies in the case of getting the best, most desirable female, and bestowal applies in the sense of having a relationship to her that is not reducible merely to her being the best female. So that instead of reducing a bestowal to appraisal the way Vanoy recommends, what I want to work out is dynamic of their interrelationship. When I make that step, which is a big threshold to get across, then I find a great variety of ways in which this can happen. And being a pluralist, I don't want to reduce any of them to each other. I just want to draw a very large, comprehensive map in which we can find our way through this quagmire of human experience with the difficulties in language and in these enormous concepts that we've created without knowing what we're talking about. Is that right?
Well, I just wanted to say that, I mean, okay, so if you're with the most, the best possible, with the best female, there is appraisal and you're saying there's bestowal. But what about the case when you end up with a female that's not the best? I mean, does bestowal not come into play a lot more than appraisal? And maybe through bestowal, love comes instead of through appraisal.
Well, I know what Vanoy would say. Remember, I have two kinds of appraisal. One is individual and the other is social. Individual appraisal gives a person a higher ranking in terms of appraisal value on the basis of what is good for you individually. And so Vanoy could very well say that's what happens when the cheerleader marries the football hero, is it? And therefore is unavailable, and you end up marrying the plain type who becomes a school teacher and who's very nice but not as beautiful as the cheerleader, right? For you, that may be the best you can hope for. That may be the best for you. You may not be able to cope with so much power as the cheerleader generates. This other woman, it may be just what you're able to deal with. So it's more comfortable to live with her. She helps you in ways that a glittering starlet like the cheerleader wouldn't even be able to appreciate. She's not vain, probably, as the cheerleader may be. And she hasn't had to cope with the kind of experience that a cheerleader has. For you, that might be the best thing, or at least the best thing that you could hope to get.
Well, the problem is, how do you even know if it's the best thing? I mean, this assumes that...
No, I mean, that would be Vanoy's reply, that even in this lesser situation, appraisal explains what I try to explain by means of bestowal. Do you remember my answer to this kind of criticism in Vanoy and the others? In my usual fashion, Stavros, since you just talked, when I cover my eyes, could you take a poll and tell me how many have read today's reading, including yourself?
This will be on camera.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm saying it'll be on camera.
Shall I take my hands away?
No, 6. 6 out of 7.
Oh, yeah.
I counted. Only 6 people have read.
Well, I could count backwards in this time.
Oh, no, he said
No,
it's
I'm saying it's 6 out of 7.
What is it?
I've been done for a while. I'm telling you. It's
Oh, I'm
6 out of
sorry.
7.
Tell me what the calculation is.
6 out of 7.
Well, that's good. That's fine. And I hope the 7th will be encouraged to go on and finish it or do it. Well, but then you must have some idea of how I try to counter the Vanoy kind of criticism. You want to get out of the way?
Well, I have a back.
Put it behind Arthur. Incidentally, are you all comfortable? You could move closer to the wall.
I'm perfect. I don't know about the rest of you. This is very nice.
Well, I know that you try to say that everyone is capable of being loved, so that in a way you can't rule out anyone as far as that we can bestow love upon anyone as long as we are able to appraise the goodness that's within them. So, like the bag lady who Van Noy says can never be loved because she's not beautiful and does not have those characteristics that you claim that she actually can be if we look beyond just her physical appearance and appraise her value as more than just like a sexual or beautiful object, but because of the other things that she has within.
I think that's a big part of the answer. Stavros?
Well, I think a relevant example is what we saw last time, My Fair Lady, where the cabbage girl turns into...
Not a cabbage girl, cabbage leaf.
Cabbage leaf, I'm sorry. Yes, the cabbage leaf turns into,
a lady.
A lady, and people, we notice that, whereas before, at least the movie doesn't show us that anybody likes her, after lots of people are interested in her. So I do think it does have to do with, I think appraisal comes before bestowal. I think in order to be able to, in order to get to know someone, I think it's the initial attraction and the beauty that brings two people together, and then it's bestowal that can either make or break the relationship. Because if you find out that the person is beautiful but otherwise has nothing in common with you, after a few months or something, then you will not continue. But if you find that bestowal happens, that there is bestowal, then it's a good relationship. So I do think that
when Eliza becomes a lady or is thought to be a highborn lady, is there more bestowal? Isn't she appraised higher?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So in that example, she was ignored earlier because her appraisal was so low. At the end, she had men ready to shoot themselves because her appraisal was so high.
Exactly.
But the point I wanted to make is different from that. That even the cabbage leaf can be loved if with a low appraisal, because there is the element of bestowal that comes in.
But I'm saying the thing is her character did not change. She had the same character throughout her transformation. The difference is that before she wasn't appraised, so she didn't have the chance to experience love. But after she was appraised, so she did have the chance to experience love. So what I'm saying is that you can be loved through bestowal, but there has to be some appraisal in order for bestowal.
No, I agree. But my point is, these are two different points.
Yeah.
One, whether appraisal comes first in some sense of the word first, and second, whether people who are lowly appraised can't be loved until they become more highly appraised. And let's separate them. I entirely agree that without appraisal there can't be bestowal and there can't be love. That's the reason why we hesitate to say that amoebas love. Amoebas probably appraise in their own amoeba-like sort of way. If they come to a clump, Adrian is in biology, so if I misrepresent something, let me know. They come upon a clump of something and they sort of circle it to see whether it's worth digesting. If it isn't, they go on to the next bit of food. They don't waste their time on some inedible thing from their point of view. That's a kind of appraisal. Animals do that all the time. And they, with their highly acute olfactory and auditory powers, and sometimes visual powers much greater than ours, they can detect what's worthy of their attention or not. Does it smell like for my cats, does it smell like fresh fish? Wow. Or is it, something that doesn't really touch their appetite, and so they ignore it. That's a system of appraisal without which there could be no life, no purpose of existence. There could not be the orders of nature that we're all familiar with. The peculiar thing about human beings is that we have developed powers of imagination which create patterns of bestowal beyond what other people do, and it's at that point that the appraised attitude can turn into a loving attitude because of the combination between bestowal and appraisal. But the bestowal itself would never occur unless there were some prior condition of appraisal. Now you might say appraisal also is based on a bestowal of a very sort of metaphysical sort, because why should it be that we as human beings appraise the way that we do? There's something in our being, something in our nature, such that we do appraise the way we do. So and this is a problem that people have often raised that I've never been able to solve, because it looks to me as if there's an infinite regress. Every bestowal is based on an appraisal, but every appraisal somehow is related to a prior bestowal, but that too is related to an appraisal. And some philosophers say, an infinite regress is something wrong with your reasoning. We can't have an infinite regress, but whoever told them the universe lends itself to ultimate solutions? I accept it in all of its unclarity, as including conditions that we can only understand in terms of an infinite regress, if that's what our analysis leads us to. So I'm not troubled with that. I don't feel the need to resolve that problem about the infinite regress. It's only people who have faith in their reason being able to show forth reality to explain how everything is, think, oh, there must be an answer, and so we must try to get it beyond the regress. I face that. There are lots of issues in life about which I suspend judgment, because I see life as this chaotic, so often random phenomenon. I was watching a documentary about Mark Twain last night, and at the very end of his life, where he suffered terribly in the loss of one or two of his children and his wife, and he saw the world in very bleak, materialistic ways. And I grew up on that. Maybe that's the reason why I'm not an idealist and a materialist, because I love Mark Twain. But what I noticed, especially last night, was the wording in which he tried to express this. He says, almost like a 20th century existentialist, he says, ultimately there's nothing. There's nothing. There's no God. There's no meaning. There is just this horrible life that we have. There is nothing. And that struck me as very different from the way I always have seen things. For me, there's always something, as long as there's life. As long as there's life, there's always something that fascinates and intrigues me and hurts me and excites me and frustrates me and makes me miserable, but it's not because there's nothing. Now, if you say, well, does that mean you're not a materialist, that after you die, you're going to spring back to life? With the lighter, the lighter concept that God has his finger on the lighter, and you die, and he flicks on that light again, which is your light. What is the term? Cigarette lighter. The cigarette lighter view of human mortality. I don't have that view. I'm prepared to believe that after life there will be nothing for me ever again. And I regret it and feel the pain of it. But it's not because that means that there's nothing in the universe. as long as I'm alive, there's an awful lot, and as long as other people are alive, as long as life goes on, it generates the meaning from within itself. And so I found the terminology of Mark Twain puzzling, though the overall materialist view I'm used to. This is related to the question of philosophy overcoming infinite regresses. The fact of an infinite regress means there's something, but it's something that my mind, which is very small, and my imagination very limited, and my place in the universe infinitely small, infinitesimal, can't cope with. So that's how it is. And the question is to make do as best we can. Mark Twain, one of the commentators said that Mark Twain was a depressive. Well, I don't know what that means, but if you are not psychologically depressed, you'll always find something meaningful, even if it's an infinite regress. So that on this question of appraisal and bestowal, I'm willing to see that as an infinite regress. On the question of reducing all bestowal, reducing all bestowal to some appraisal, that I think is a problem that I can work with, and that's where I continue to disagree with critics like Vanoy. Unfortunately, Vanoy doesn't answer, as far as I know, at least not in writing. He hasn't given any answer to my reply to him at that symposium, and I don't know whether he's even alive.
Well, I just want to say, do you think that so if you accept somebody with his faults initially, do you think that it's possible that these faults you actually end up after a long time appraising these faults? Do you think it's in human nature?
I think there is, no, you're right, there is this dynamic between bestowal and appraisal, so that having bestowed upon somebody, you find that that person becomes appraisively different. Why? Well, because your bestowal is a gift of life, which is so important for us. It can make life meaningful to you. Being loved is something we all want. Freud is wonderful on that. For him, that's a fundamental fact. There are other facts he may ignore, but that everybody wants to be loved. Well, if you get it, even undeservedly, you might say, "Oh, I don't deserve that." Well, don't count your blessings. You're lucky you got it. You then change in response to that. You begin to believe it. Or better yet, you interact with a person such that you do change toward something closer to your own ideal and possibly to the other person's ideal. And once that happens, then the dialectic continues. The appraisal is greater, and that causes a higher level of bestowal, and that is something beautiful. In a sense, it's an ideal. It's an ideal of satisfied love. What we might even think of as married love. Marriage is an institution sort of based upon this as a possibility, right? And one might argue, if one is a cynic, but rarely satisfied. Most marriages are not like that. Why? Because people are imperfect, they're incapable of enacting the dialectic in a profitable way. May be true, that's a sociological question, and I don't really feel any need to talk at any length about that. I talk around that in the paper you read earlier in the course on marriage, same-sex and opposite sex. Remember, I sort of try to debunk the importance that marriage has for people who are either homosexual, heterosexual, or homosexual, right? That may be an ideal that one shouldn't glorify too much. It's nevertheless a great ideal, and when one encounters people who say, "I met so-and-so, we fell in love at first sight, and we've been happy ever after. I can't imagine being myself without him or her." I don't know that I believe any of that, but I understand what they're saying, and insofar as it's true, it is a beautiful ideal that human beings are sometimes capable of. Let me go into another little digression. Over the weekend, I watched a documentary about the French philosopher who died about a month ago, I think, Jacques Derrida, and who is very prominent, or has been prominent, in continental circles and among literary people in America. The analytical school, I don't think, pay much attention to him. He's interested in the nature of being, and that's not a fashionable topic. Have any of you heard of him? Well, the reason I mention him now is because we see his wife of 40 years. They look like a good couple. They don't talk about their love. And he says, no, love is something one can't talk about. I'm not going to tell you anything on the camera, which I can understand. But he does say, in one context, there's one person I've loved perfectly all my life, and that's my sister. My sister and I have had a love for each other which is completely perfect, completely pure. He kept emphasizing this kind of terminology. No quarrels, never fights. We've always had a wonderful, perfect relationship, right? As if in contrast to most of his other relationships, maybe even his wife, but he's not going into his wife, and so I wouldn't want to speculate about that. But he emphasizes the sister, right? And then one hears the voice of the interviewer saying, really, what about the time when you set fire to her crib? and then he has no answer to that. He sort of smiles and looks so comfortable, and the camera cuts to something else. So however perfect anybody thinks a relationship may be, or you can't be sure that you can take it at face value, right? Even if that was the only time of difficulty with his sister, is it likely that the two of them have forgotten that, or that hasn't influenced their later relationship? It's something to be considered, and he won't consider it. Let me go. I was saying that in terms of the ambiguity between appraisal and bestowal, that however much one can work out the dialectic successfully, there isn't going to be a point of perfection, and those who claim to have established that harmonious dialectic may or may not be telling the truth. But if that is something that you care about, if that's an ideal that matters to you, well, then that has to be taken at face value. Many people have made their lives meaningful either because they found that other self, unlike Beethoven, and in the case of Beethoven, he didn't, because he was so special and so difficult and so hard to live with. But or you didn't find it, but you kept looking. The pursuit of it was a pursuit that made life meaningful to you. In one or two of your papers, you speak of Don Juan as somebody who was always in the pursuit of love. Well, that can make a life meaningful. If you're pursuing a perfect marriage and are able to work out the dialectic in that context, fine, why not? If it doesn't mean that much to you, or you've decided, I'm not good at the marriage business, but I want to create a perfect work of art. You never do, but you keep working at that. Well, that will make your life meaningful to you as well. There isn't any one answer, either to the meaning in life or to what should count as being a viable love. Have we gone too far from where we started? in terms of either of you? You're the only two, well, and Stavros who said much. The three of you. What about the rest of you? Do you want to pursue bestowal and appraisal further?
Still have another question.
Well, then let's hear them.
Okay, so earlier you were talking about the fact that everybody wants the cheerleader or, the football player, whatever, it is that you're going after.
No, well,
But-
not exclusively.
Yeah, well, that's like everyone's kind of ideal. But
It's an ideal that we all have in one way or another.
And you said then that, well, some people, the plain school teacher is the better type of person for them, and they would be more comfortable or, that satisfies their needs. But does that mean then that even when you're with the school teacher, you still have the ideal of someone else who you think could be better?
That can ruin a marriage. That she says, it isn't me you're in love with, it's your first wife. Or it isn't me you're in love with, it's that incredible fixation on let's say they were in high school together, on Betty or whatever her name is. You're not thinking of me, you're still thinking about Betty. Why are you, hung up on that? Why can't you ever get beyond it in order to appreciate me? That would be a real problem in a marriage, I agree. But it's not inevitable for two reasons. One is because people change a great deal. And looking back, you might have said, she may have been gorgeous, right? But I don't think I could have lived with her. What I get out of you is so much better. You're patient, you're kind, you're gentle, you're sweet, and you're a great cook, or great in mathematics, and that's what I need in my profession. And so I'm glad I didn't give in to that infantile or juvenile interest in facial beauty and sex appeal, because people do change that way. Second, which is something I'll come back to in a minute. Stavros?
Oh, I just want to point out that, well, you're saying that after you've presumably been married to her for lots of years, or been with her for lots of years, so you really don't have any idea how it would have been with the other person at all. I mean, the only way you saw the cheerleader was, you never actually interacted with her too closely. You saw her walking around, you knew her, you went out with her, whatever. But you never actually lived with her for 10 years. So
Right, but you don't remember that, the negative part. You only remember a slice of it which had an effect on you.
Well, I think saying stuff like that, where I'm probably better off that I went with you. I think that's kind of trying to convince yourself that you are better off without really believing it.
Well, I don't know. I occasionally, talking about myself now, think of one young woman I knew in college who had all the makings of what I cared about without necessarily being explicit, and who sort of had a very admiring way of looking at me. She was pretty, she was wealthy, she came from the right stock, all the things I've never been. And I found her very attractive at the time. I don't know, she probably is a grandmother now. She married the right man out of her own circle. But she always looked at me as if I was very special, right? And then I went on and married somebody else. And occasionally I think of her, and then it's a little pleasure I sort of indulge in, but then I always laugh at myself and say, you hardly knew her. This is just an image. And nothing might have come of it if she really did get to know you better, or you spent time with her, if you tried to get close to her. And if you got married, it might have been a disaster. You know nothing about her, really, or about yourself in relation to her. And anyhow, it's only one of those things. and therefore it's of no importance. So that the same thing could be said about the cheerleader. One could say, well, yeah, that was an image I had at the time, but it isn't my reality because I went on in very different ways since she went and married the football player. It's a little like a cartoon I've always remembered of a man, a portly gentleman lying on the couch and the psychiatrist behind him, and the man is saying, I could have bought IBM at $5 a share. We all have that kind of feeling of having failed because, we didn't do a miraculously wonderful thing, right? I even had it recently because Google, which is something I've believed in for years, Google is just marvelous. It's a great achievement of the modern world. Whenever I want to learn about anything, I just go to Google. It came on the market, and it ended up about a year ago, I think it was, at 88. And I've long since stopped thinking of speculating on the stock market, but it was part of my life, and I didn't do anything. And then within a year, I think it's now doubled. And even though I don't speculate, and I don't care about what I would have made if I had, well, what I've done with that money, I still have the feeling I could have bought Google at 88. That's just, part of the human imagination. It's got nothing to do with the realities that go into whom one loves and whom one could be happy in love with. That's one answer to your point. We change in that respect. But having the lingering hangover of the past, without which we wouldn't have an imagination, it's part of our creativity, that we create these fantasies. And so I don't demean them any more than I demean soap operas. I think I mentioned that in what you read. This is people dealing with life, and my job as a philosopher is to try to understand it. I get bored by soap operas, so I never watch them. But that I don't demean the fact that this is relevant to life. Okay, that's one thing I wanted to say. The second was, this was what I was about to say when Stavros started talking, and please interrupt me again at any point. We not only change in that respect, but we also change in our ability to perceive the good and the beautiful. And having reached old age, I find that nowadays, and for quite a number of years, but something I could never have done earlier, I have a way of discovering beauty in people, in women and in men, but in different ways, because the sexual orientation is always present, even if it's not active. And so I look at women differently from the way I look at men. But I look at both men, and to the extent that I'm capable of doing it, animals. I look at them and perceive phenomena about them that I could never have perceived before, and beauties about them. So that when some people say to me, can you find old women beautiful? I always answer, I think beauty exists at every age. It's simply a question of your being able to perceive it. And in most people, there is some kind of beauty, usually of an unexpected sort, one that I would never have been able to perceive, that on the basis of a life devoted to this, as it has been with me, there are all sorts of beauties that come out that are, for me, very valuable, that I cherish, and that the person herself or himself might not even recognize. I find that. I find that in my relation to my students, I perceive things that I couldn't have before. I'm still an egocentric, but I still know how to look into the eyes of the people I'm talking to and perceive what's going on to some extent in their minds. And that is a cause of creating in myself the ability to bestow value, which then gives them a greater appraise of value. And that is the function of human development. In my case, I'm sure it's very limited, and a saint, whatever the religion may be, because the religion is simply a way of authorizing this kind of process. You can have it without the religion. It's the process that, for me, matters most of all. But I'm happy to use the word saint for the kind of person I'm talking about, whether or not the person is an atheist. A saint can do it better than most people. A saint can do it better than I can. That's very nice. I'm not a saint. And I then comfort myself and say, yeah, but saints don't write books, so I have something the saint doesn't have. But the two are not unrelated. It's the expression of yourself that underlies this ability that I'm talking about, and the ability shows how bestowal, which is so vague and amorphous, can develop and exist creatively throughout a person's life and get better and better. I wish mine were better than it is. You notice I stare at you all the time. I'm beginning to wonder whether that's why often when I'm in the street, and I told you I have this habit, I'm staring at everything, and other people don't. They seem wrapped up in themselves or ashamed, or the women don't like to look at men because then the men will hit on them, so it's a protective pretense to be unobserving that women have. But women are very good to observe subtly what they want to observe, but they don't stare with the kind of fixation that I do, trying to make contact with whatever is going on, even if I never talk to the person or touch the person or have anything to do with the person. For me, that's a creative gift related to bestowal that I'm struggling to bring about, but don't succeed very well. But what I notice is that people smile at me. And I think, oh, is this somebody I know whom I've forgotten? A student who's a former student of mine, because I'm terrible about, like all professors, forgetting who their students were. Or is it because there's a look on my face which elicits that? Maybe I'm even smiling because I'm concentrating. I don't frown when I do that. And so they just smile back. And sometimes they talk to me or look as if they know me. And it's embarrassing. I was in the country in New Hampshire this weekend where I have a summer place, and a man in Walmart's, I was in Walmart's, and in the aisle, a man smiled at me, and I wondered, is this my neighbor? And I've forgotten who he is, and what should I say to him? And, I didn't want to cut him, I didn't want to ignore him, and I had no idea. He looked a little like somebody, but no, that's not him. So I fabricated. I said, isn't it terrible, the tax rate going up 12.5%? Thinking that's something everybody would be concerned about. And he said, well, it's always going up. And he probably had realized that he had smiled at an idiot. He had to escape from me. I have no way of knowing. It's part of the peril of living this way that I do. And so it can be even worse. Nevertheless, that's the second way in which bestowal can creatively discover appraised values that one might not have recognized, and therefore that if nobody recognizes them, they don't exist, because an appraised value has to belong to some community of appraisers. And so there are people who may be beautiful in one sense, but not in the sense of being appraised very high, because nobody may perceive his or her beauty. Should we take a little break? Yeah, we've been going on for almost an hour and a half. Why don't we take a little break? Stop the music. But not more. Now, I would be very eager to hear any other comments and criticisms that you might have about, could be the same subject we've been talking about, appraisal and bestowal, or anything else related to this reading for today. You've read The Pursuit of Love, and you must have noticed how different this writing is, how later it is from the time that The Pursuit of Love was written. As a matter of fact, it's about the same period. It's just that didn't have, for The Pursuit of Love, I didn't have the kind of stimulus that was given to me by participating in the symposium, which for me, as I think I may have told you, was a very creative experience. Did I tell you about that? How I used to sit in the first row with a chair in front of me and take off my shoes and comment on the papers that people were giving, and they eventually got into the habit of calling on me first, and that my entire effort was to help them make their ideas clear. And I don't know how well I succeeded or whether I'm even good at doing that, but I could notice that they were surprised. The usual setting for such a thing is that everybody's trying to impress everybody else, everybody's trying to one-up everybody else, everybody is using this as an opportunity to present ideas of his own as if they were original. And here I was encouraging them to attack me and being happy to work at the difficulties. I think I may have told you, stop me if I have told this to you, about one person who afterwards sent in his essay for publication, and the editors asked me to look at them. And I wrote him saying, you know, you're too flattering to me. You don't agree with me on various points, and you ought to develop them. And I sort of gave him hints about how to attack Irving Singer in his writing, and he took me up on that. And then what got published was a much less favorable paper, not only because he was attacking me, which is fine, but also he eliminated places in which he was praising me too much. So I was in a sense, a little disappointed, but also I realized that was right. That, I can live without the praise, but the world would benefit from his expressing his contrary point of view. And in that respect, it was all very creative for me. I had an audience. I had people I could work with, and it immediately came out in a publication. But that's why I'm encouraging you to let me know your views. It'll all come out in OCW. This is your chance to be on film making a telling comment that Irving Singer can't reply to. Adriana?
I wanted to comment on Marvin Cole's criticism. I agree with you in that we shouldn't try to change the beloved and that we should accept him or her as they are. But I think that there is some kind of paternalism for the other person, in the sense that if we didn't do anything to change something that we can see is hurting our beloved, it would be almost like not caring. So it's not trying to impose our values, but it's just looking for the betterment of that other person that matters to us.
No, I think you're putting your finger exactly on the problem, which is, where do you draw the line between acceptance as an expression of your soul of value and ability to love, and where in going beyond that are you, I mean, in extending that, are you losing interest or showing a lack of interest or appearing to? And if you go beyond it, aren't you being paternalistic, and that undermines your loving? You know, if you tell a person, don't do that, you want to do it, but I won't love you, I'll hate you for it, or it's wrong for you to do that. It might be good advice, but it isn't necessarily an expression of love. This is a problem that people face not only in their intimate relationship in adulthood, but it's systemic to the relationship between parents and children. Because if you love your children, then you should accept all these childish things they do. But somehow the children can't understand why you don't. They take it as an act of love when you say, no, you mustn't set fire to the cat or your sister's crib. And, you know, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just playing a little game which involves incendiaries. From the child's point of view, the very fact that parents have authority, that they can tell you what's right and what's wrong, they can punish you, they can control your choices in life, some of which they can't possibly understand because they are so much older, that indicate to the child that the parent doesn't really love them. And this is part of the queasiness and ambiguity in being human. I don't think there's any solution to that. I think it's, at this point, the statement of the Buddha comes in. You know, the Buddha, people in the stories about the Buddha, they come to him for advice about difficult questions, and he ends up saying, work out your salvation with diligence, which isn't what the person wanted. He wanted a yes or a no. What should I do? And there isn't a yes or a no. Life doesn't lend itself to that. And this is one area, I think, in which that's true. You can't draw a line. The line is artificial. It's like the artificiality in most of our laws about human behavior. I mean, we agree that you mustn't murder other people unless it's done because you're a soldier, then it's all right. But when you're not a soldier, you can't even kill people, let alone murder them. Why? Well, society would fall apart, or some abstract reasons like that. They're very good abstract reasons. I'm not in favor of eliminating laws against murder, but it's very hard to know how to adjudicate. In the case of sex, it's even more so. Most states in this country have laws to protect juveniles from sexual behavior of a consensual sort that the child might make on the grounds that the child isn't at an age in which he or she can make a mature, rational decision. All right? Children do have to be protected. But at what age? Often it varies from community to community. It certainly varies in other countries. Should it be 18? Should it be 14? Should it be 12? In India, they used to, maybe they still do, have marriage at the age of 11. And I don't know if that's the result of choice, but then marriage might not be as a result of choice anyhow. It's very hard to know what the age is. And I don't have any recommendations. You know, my feeling is like the Buddha's. There's a story, not unrelated to this course, of the Buddha having created a man, and the first man, and eventually, after a while, the man goes to the Buddha and says, "Thank you very much for having created me. The trouble is, I'm lonely. I'm all alone by myself." And the Buddha says, "Oh, all right, I'll take care of that." So he creates a woman. And the man is very grateful, and they go off. And after a while, the man comes back, and says, you were very good to me in giving me a woman as my companion, but I can't live with her. We're so different, and we argue and quarrel. And so the Buddha says, oh, well, that's all right, I'll create divorce. You can divorce when things are going badly. So they divorce, and then the man comes back with a woman and says to the Buddha, you gave me, I was lonely without a woman, you gave me the woman, and I couldn't live with her. Now we're divorced, and I can't live without her. And this is the problem for the Buddha. And so the Buddha smiles benignly and says, you can't live with each other, you can't live without each other. Work out your salvation with diligence. Which seems to me like an impossible answer, except that it's the right answer. If it indicates there's no right and wrong, you've got to do the best you can. That's the way nature has structured our most important aspects. There's no guarantee that children must be 18 before their consensual admittance into sex isn't called rape. It depends on what people think, and what the society allows, and what will work in any particular society. Even in the question of obscenity, the Miller ruling of the Supreme Court about obscenity in movies or literature or anything has one of the criteria, what is acceptable to a community. So in some parts of this country, one kind of activity or production or work of art is called obscene, and people can be put in prison for it. And in other parts, it's perfectly all right. It even extends to prostitution, which is legal in parts of Nevada, and very illegal in most of the country, or bigamy. There isn't any answer. There are answers. There isn't any assurance that there's a right way and a wrong way that applies to everyone. You can find out what's the right way for you, perhaps, if you're lucky, or your society can, through trial and error. But a priori, because of the structure of reality, or because of some religious ultimate which is supposed to reveal the nature of being, that I feel is the wrong way of approaching the situation. So what can we do with this? How would you resolve the question about paternalism and love?
Well, I would even question the existence of a paternalism and personal love and the love of a couple, because you are saying that children regard the adults as having the authority. But I think that in a love relationship, when someone tells the partner, when the partner tells the other partner, you should do this, he or she is not imposing that. It's just a suggestion. So, and I think the other person doesn't regard his or her partner as being an authority. I think it's more a situation of equals. So.
Well, but what if, in the example that Cole uses, the wife is addicted to nicotine, let's say, and doesn't want to be. He knows she doesn't want to be, but she is addicted. Does he have a right to steal her cigarettes, to force her in some violent way even, not to smoke? Does he have a right to take it out of her mouth or bawl her out of love, saying, I wouldn't want you to have it? Let's say that she has said to him, if I ever have a serious disease, I just don't want to go through with it. I don't want to live and suffer. I just as soon die, right? Now, from his point of view, this may sound suicidal. Let's say that she keeps in her medicine chest, one day he opens the medicine chest, let's say she has a separate bathroom, and in her medicine chest he sees a bottle of poison. And he thinks it's because she really would take it if she ever went to the doctor and he said, you have an incurable cancer, right? Out of love for her and his eagerness to keep her alive, does he have a right to steal the poison and empty it? Does he have a right to interfere with her desire under these circumstances? I think that's where the issue comes in. It would be paternalistic, but Cole's argument is that if you really care about somebody, you can't just stand by and ignore the hazards. You have to act paternalistically out of love. Your love requires you to be paternalistic. Do you want to carry this further? Do you agree with him or not?
I think I would say yes, but there is a limit to the extent to which we can take that paternalism. I don't know about the situation with the poison, but about the situation with the cigarettes, if we know that that is what the other person wants to quit, then I think helping her and giving her support would help her achieve that goal of quitting.
It might or might not. You know, my argument would be out of love, you could make a very strong effort. You might use your imagination to think of ways in which you might control her addiction, or remind her that nowadays people who are diagnosed with serious cancers often don't die of it because there are so many medical and surgical interventions that can prolong a person's life, and people who succeed in that are glad that they go through it. You can make that kind of effort out of love. And if you didn't, one would say, did you really love her? You agree with her that if you're going to have to face the ordeal of curing your cancer, life isn't worth living? Looks as if maybe you don't care about her. Maybe you don't. But if you force that kind of view, the need to perpetuate life under those circumstances upon her, that doesn't look like love. Love, of course, love consists in accepting the other person as he or she is, rather than regulating her or him in accordance with ideals of yours that may not match hers, in this case. And this applies to children. And I think in the case of children, it's much, much worse, because with adults who are capable of loving each other, they have enough rationality, they often have a lot of experience, they have feelings, they may be confused about their feelings, but they may also know pretty much what they want to get out of life. Doesn't mean that they know the meaning of life, but a woman might be in a position to say, I've seen people suffering and I don't think life is worth it. I think I'd rather not suffer. This is something a mature, rational person might say, as opposed to two alternatives. One, the person is out of her mind in a psychotic episode, has gone mad, is not in control of her rationality, in which case one has to intervene because she can't make a decision, and you have to, and you'll make it in accordance with what you consider best for her. But at the moment, it's not going to be what she thinks is best for her, because if she did, then things would be different. And the second alternative is if she hasn't developed enough to be rational. She might be retarded, she might be rationally defective, or she may be in the condition of children, which means that her powers of rationality haven't yet matured. Children are not psychotic or defective or retarded when they're irrational in childhood, but we know it takes a little time. So what do we do about them? We love them, we want what's best for them, and they often have enough rationality to disagree with us and even to defeat our hopes for what we consider best for them. And then, of course, there's that whole intervening period in adolescence when children are very strong in that respect, can put up a big fight. Out of love for them, would one say, well, okay, you want to go roller skating on the edge of a precipice, what am I to say? I hope you survive, right? Looks as if it's not love. Or out of love, do we simply have to give up and say they know the dangers and we have to accept them as they are? And I don't find an easy solution. Every person is different, every age is different, every situation is different. Some of the hazards are themselves a function of temporary conditions of society. At one time, women, in particular girls in particular, their freedom was tremendously restrained so that they don't have a child out of wedlock, unmarried. When they might be capable of love, they might be capable of very strong emotional, sexual feelings, but if they got knocked up, which itself is a derogatory word, then they're ruined for the rest of their lives, and also probably ruining the family and all sorts of consequences. That was a reality that parents had to face within my lifetime, certainly. It isn't, and it's still a reality in many parts of the world, in many societies. It isn't anymore in America today. So the problem about love in conflict with freedom acceptance in conflict with freedom doesn't quite have a constant answer. It varies. And if anyone lays down a rule, however golden they call that rule, it seems to me to be leaden, not a golden rule, but a dead rule that should be avoided. That's why I'm a pluralist. One has to work out one's salvation with diligence, knowing that there is no one way of doing that, no single way of doing that. I don't know how, as I think I mentioned in the reply to Cole's critique, to many people this sounds wishy-washy, and my students often do say, I'm wishy-washy. I don't have any fixed rules or right answers, but that's precisely because of the way I see the world. I don't want to be anything other than wishy-washy, except for the overtones of that. So I don't know whether what I say in response to Cole is satisfying. Anybody want to comment on that? Then let me tell you how that got written. At a meeting of the American Philosophical Association one year, just by chance, I sat down at lunch, and here was this person I didn't know anything about him, named Herbert Cole. And when I told him my name, he said, Irving Singer. Wow, I'm meeting Irving Singer like this? And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I've been invited to participate in a symposium on your philosophy of love, the one you know about. And we got to talking and spent about an hour and a half or so talking very well and very intimately about things not unrelated to what we were just saying. it all comes out more impersonal, of course, in the writing, but he was talking in terms of his own life and others. And it was a friendship. It was really a very nice thing to have experienced. At the symposium, he submitted a paper which he had written for some other occasion on the concept of caring about. And I think I mentioned that. And didn't mention me, or hardly, I don't know if I even mentioned me in the paper. But we were on such good terms. When I saw this, I said to him, look, you had these other ideas that are in conflict with mine. Why can't you put that into your paper? Or, if you want, just publish the paper, which is interesting, and then have a postscript in which you attack me, because that's obviously relevant. And I showed how out of the paper one could derive views that would be in conflict with mine. And he did. He wrote a paper, I don't know, it's 10 or 15 pages long, an addendum, which he called postscript. And that's what I was responding to. And that the both papers, the both parts, appeared in the volume. And I felt really very good about that. And then I hadn't thought about these issues, but now I had to. And now I confronted them, because here was a person who was very sympathetic to me and not an idiot, very far from being an idiot, but who had ideas I had to respect and did respect, but hadn't thought about responding to. And I was very grateful and felt this was a wonderful opportunity. I mention this to you because, being students, you have a chronic pathology forced upon you, which is just because you're students, you are expected to be the recipient of the criticisms of these older people who not only criticize you, but also grade you and influence your future life, because you get a final score, and that might cause you not to go to graduate school, no, get into graduate school, to law school, medical school, engineering. I mean, this terrible condition they put you in is if you were children again who have to be told how to live. And it's a terrible thing. Now, the counterbalance to that is, if you're lucky, they'll criticize you in ways that will help you develop your mind. I'm not good at that, so when you read my comments on your paper, particularly the first one, they're usually not very helpful. But some people devote their lives to working out that kind of criticism, and you should cherish them. And I cherish this opportunity of being attacked because that's one of the ways in which one learns. It brings out the creativity in you because you have to respond. And that the response is itself part of the creativity. But I'll come back to that another time. Anybody want to defend Cole against me? Also, there were payoffs, too, for me, because the sequel to The Pursuit of Love is the book I think I've mentioned called The Harmony of Nature and Spirit. And there are several chapters on the nature of happiness. It turns out that Cole had written several papers on that, and I asked him to send them to me. I wouldn't have known him or thought about them, and I used those papers. I don't remember if they were criticized him, but they fructified my thinking. And so this kind of interrelationship, if it's done properly and cultivated, can be very, very beneficial, and I encourage you to seek it out, to develop your minds and your souls. Not to be afraid that the idea of people are going to be attacking you. All right, then I'll continue a little along this vein. While I was working on the book called The Harmony of Nature and Spirit, I gave a public lecture at the University of Madrid in Spain. Very big audience, and I read a paper or delivered a paper. I talked my paper the way I talk to you in English to a large audience. But it was simultaneous translation, so that people who didn't know any English understood exactly what I was saying. And that was very, very gratifying. Afterwards, the professor of metaphysics at the Complutense, which is the big university in Madrid, who had introduced me and was the host, there were questions, and his question was, you know, when I listen to you talking about life and the good life and morals, even religion, I have the feeling you don't believe in any ethics. You don't believe in good and evil. There is nothing that you convey as your articles of ethical faith. And I said, is that true? And I said, well, yeah, in the context of what I was saying, what you know, you're familiar with now, I won't repeat it, it is true. I don't believe in any. And he said, well, if a student comes to me and gives me a problem, a moral problem, says, what should I do? I tell him, or her, I tell him that's why he or she comes to me to help. And I tell him what is right and what is wrong. And you can't do that. And I said, no, I don't do that. That's not in keeping with my philosophy. And he was sort of shocked at this, as if, you know, I run through the street committing crimes whenever I can get away with it. As if I was myself without any morals. Oh, no, I think I said, I have an ethics of my own that I'm very strict about, that I live in accordance with, but I don't try to proselytize to get other people to agree with me. I think that I may have said something like that. That was the end of it. Afterwards, I was very upset. I thought I had agreed too readily. I hadn't really worked at the problem, and I didn't know quite how to work on it. Then I was still writing The Harmony of Nature and Spirit, and it kept lingering in me. And the result was that one of the major chapters came out in which I defended my philosophy. It's a chapter at the end, and it's a little technical and maybe, I don't know if it would interest you or not. It's called The Aesthetic Foundations of Religion and Morality. And there I was confronting this problem that the professor of metaphysics had with me and defending it as best I can, as fully and as honestly as I think I've ever been able to. It would not have, I don't know, maybe it would never have come into existence if he hadn't made those critical comments about me and my ideas. What other papers or criticisms intrigued you? We've talked about Van Oy's on bestowal and appraisal. We've talked about Cole on acceptance versus freedom. I mean, freedom, no, or is it freedom? Paternalism, I'm sorry, lack of freedom. It's acceptance of freedom versus paternalism, which limits the freedom of the other person. Whether it's literally paternalism in relation to children, which that we don't talk about very much in that place, or in love between two adults, right? What else? There's so much more that I think goes into those pages. What about the questions about religion? Several of the people there were Jesuits, were priests. Mr. Nota, is it Nota, N-O-T-A, isn't it? Nota? Mr. Nota was, I think, a Paulist, not a Jesuit, but Principe was a very prominent Jesuit, at maybe the head of the whatever they call it at the University of Toronto, devoted to Catholic theology. And then there were people who talked on historical topics, Kierkegaard, for instance. None of that excited you?
Well, I mean, we've talked about the love of things before.
Love of things, yeah. That's right. That's come up in the course here.
I mean, you brought up.
This is, I think, the most extensive discussion of it that I'm capable of writing so far, or it certainly comes out of what you were writing. In terms of words, I don't know which is more, but this is later development of my ideas about the love of things.
I mean, personally, I don't think I can. I do believe you can love things, but I guess it's sort of love in a loose term, just because you love what they give to you. You don't actually love them for what they are. Like, you can't love the bookshelf for what it is.
Right, that was part of that's in your paper, isn't it?
Yeah, that's my view on I mean, I feel stupid repeating it.
No, please repeat it, develop it.
Well, I mean, I feel that you love something because you love what it does to you. You can't, I mean, there's no possible way you can love, a bookshelf or a couch. I mean, you love the couch. Why? Because you sit on it and you're comfortable. But I think we say love for lack of a better word, really. I mean...
Well, it's a different kind of love, simply because it's not responded to. Or if I love my car and think the car loves me back, I'm called crazy. Anyone who feels that way has to be institutionalized or given at least some psychotherapy. Cars are things, and things are incapable of having feelings of the sort that we do. So it's a one-way love. But that doesn't mean that I can't love it because of what it does for me. Sure it does. And that's the way I love people. That's the appraisive element. It's because of what she does for me, as to use the casual phrase. You know, she does something for me, right? That I love her. And that use is similar to a woman going into a department store and trying on a dress, and the saleswoman says to get her to buy it, you know, it really does something for you. Or to get her to buy a more expensive dress, say, no, don't get that. It doesn't do anything for you, right? The idea that the dress does something for you makes a great deal of sense, but it's the way in which your relationship with somebody does something for you. If, however, that the dress doesn't respond, or the car, being things, they can't respond the way that people can beyond that, then it can't be called anything like a love of persons, and it is a love of things that you have. You have a love of the things, and they don't love you back in the same way, but they can do things for you. I love my computer because of the way in which it helps me to think and saves me all sorts of tedious operations. It's not because I think it's doing this in a way that a person would help me to think or save operations by doing things for me.
Well, I mean, it's just it seems that I'm not sure if I understood what you said before. You said that when you love somebody, you love for what he or she does for you. Is that?
That's the appraisive element. You also bestow love upon her or him, and you can bestow love upon things. It happens all the time. That's why people like me don't part. One of the reasons don't part with their old cars. I sort of always build up a love relationship to them. This is part of what we mean by sentimentality. Why are people sentimental? It's because they have bestowed value upon things that once mattered to them and probably don't to other people. If they overdo it, then we say they're sentimental. But nostalgia, which is a love of the past, is very deep in human beings. It may be regrettable sometimes, and there are whole schools of literature that I discuss in relationship to James Joyce, who has no sentiment, no nostalgia, I'm sorry, who has no nostalgia, who is fighting nostalgia in order to be a realist observing the world as it is, right? And Orson Welles, whom I write about, who struggles with nostalgia in himself. It is something you don't, not all artists accept, but it's a phenomenon in human nature to be nostalgic. Well, that's a bestowal of importance upon things that are past, which may have once had immediate importance in terms of your feelings and emotions, but don't anymore. Right? But those things don't reciprocate. How could they? But we have a kind of love for them, which is a very important element of human life. The love of money, which is supposed to be the root of all evil, it's not the root of all evil, because there are a great many evils that have nothing to do with money. It can be the root of all philanthropy and all goodness, if only because the people who have devoted themselves out of a love of money then create foundations. They don't know how to bestow the money to their liking, so they make foundations that do good things. But the root of it, forget about that. The root of it is the goodness is the love of money. I wonder if we're going to hear a message. All right, it stopped. Well, please continue. You don't agree?
I got thrown off by the phone, but
We could take it off the hook.
I definitely.
Is it worth it? I don't know. Go ahead.
I see what you're saying. I mean, it's just that for me, I guess just the word love for me just means the love of persons. I mean, I guess you sort of you categorize love of persons, love of things, but I
And
love of religion.
what?
Oh, love of ideals.
Sure. Which is an extremely important part of human nature. People wouldn't be killing each other righteously as they do in war if there weren't this love of ideals. Particularly modern wars, where all the suicide bombers are dying for some ideal. And democratic countries like ours justify their behavior by saying there's the ideal of bringing democracy to these people, the ideal, World War I, the ideal was to make the world safe for democracy. That was the ideal underlying World War I. Ideals are very important. It isn't in the good old days when one tribe would slaughter another in order to get their wives and chattels. But even then, they had ideals that Jehovah ordained it. It's the love of God that we chosen people should dominate the rest of the world, which seems to be a ludicrous ideal, but that was the ideal. Or the Crusaders, that Christianity must be spread and eliminate these infidels. Infidels means people without faith. They had their own faith, and then they called the Christians infidels because they claimed they weren't people of faith. So that on both sides, the religion created by its very nature a system of ideals that justified a great deal of slaughter. And people acted out of a love of those ideals. They didn't just act casually, out of a love of those ideals, even if they were motivated by economic reasons, the way the Crusaders obviously were, and everyone assumed, and I think can still justify, that we are in the Middle East with our high ideals, at least partly because we're afraid of being deprived of the oil that runs our industries.
Well,
so the love of ideals is a very important part of life.
I always view, I mean, this is making a controversial point, but I always view that ideals are sort of another opium of the people. I mean, to convince people to do stuff.
I don't know. I think it's so deeply ingrained in human nature, and that's part of the tragedy of life, that we can't just slough it off easily.
No, I agree with you that it's so, that's what I'm saying, it's so deeply engraved that you can convince people to go to war in a totally different country where they have really nothing to gain but everything to lose, just for the love of ideals. I mean, I agree with that.
And they do it not because of brainwashing. In the Second World War, people couldn't make sense out of the kamikaze pilots who were suicide bombers, except they had their planes were the bombs. That they were somehow fanatics, that they were brainwashed, that they, was somehow in a kind of drug-induced stupor. The ideal that these people had a love of ideals, their ideals, and were heroic in acting that way, was never recognized by people on the other side, by the Americans, for instance. And if they had recognized it, it might have been more realistic to beware of this kind of devotion to ideals. As I think I've said before, they only had about 2,000 kamikaze pilots, but if they had more, they would have destroyed the American Navy because they were so successful.
I mean, it's just that as far as love of ideals, love of things, and love for persons, I guess it's just my definition of love. What I've learned for love to be can only be I can only use it for love of persons. I mean,
well, why? Why do you have to limit yourself?
Well, it's not so much. This is more of a words issue. I mean, love of ideals I would call passion for ideals. I wouldn't. I mean, I don't know. I always view love as a two-way road. So it's just my problem that it's hard for me to call.
It's true. Ideals, like things, don't love us back.
Yeah.
We create them. But once we've created them, then there is a love we can have for them, just as a parent can love a child. One of the strongest emotions is the love of one's children. Not everyone has it, and it doesn't last very long, perhaps. But I just about a month ago, I became a grandparent for the first time, which I'd always wanted. My children had other things to do in life. I became a grandparent, and what has struck me is what a profound feeling and emotion that is created in me. I couldn't have foreseen that. It's something I somehow wanted, but yeah, look, here's this grandchild I have now. That's very deep. Now, the love of children is, again, a love of something you have created, because it's been through your behavior that this biological process issued into a new form of life. Now, you might say, oh, but the grandchild is alive and the cars and ideals are not alive. That's true, I know. There are different kinds of responses, but they're alike in one respect, that they're all created by human beings in one way or another.
Can I comment on
Go ahead.
I think that, like, I kind of have. There's oftentimes someone who, like, you can love someone a lot and they don't love you back, but does that mean that you don't really love them because you're not getting like a reciprocation from them? And like, you know, that, I mean, that could happen like at any point in life. And then also there could be like you love someone, and then I think we've talked about the case before is like, what if they get really sick, or they get like Alzheimer's disease and forget who you are, or they go into a coma, and you could still love them even though they have like no, you know, they don't love you at all back anymore. So there's like still a love of, you could almost call that person a thing now that they're like a vegetable sitting there, or that, you know, they have no control over themselves, but you still love them for
But
like.
you love them for the fact that they are not just a thing. They're the relics, the remains of a person whom you've had experience with, so that there are all of these different varieties. So what you're emphasizing, the thing that I presuppose, is that love isn't a single thing. I never give a definition of love. I only talk about, I make distinctions which enable one to talk about it from different points of view. I'm a maker of distinctions. That's a great variety in life, and I relish that. I relish that. And I don't know whether this is personal, because I have very wide appetites in food, for instance. Maybe the way I was brought up, to enjoy all kinds of food. And in principle, I relish all kinds of animal forms. Now, I'm very limited, of course, and some people I can't understand and can't tolerate, but that's a shortcoming of mine. But the idea of loving everything is fundamental to my nature, just I'm not very good at it.
Well, I mean, just in response to Veronica, I wanted to say that, first of all, if you love somebody without him loving you back, I guess I believe that you can't love somebody until you've experienced him or her in a love relationship.
What if they stop loving you?
Okay.
Like you've been in love and then they don't love you anymore.
Okay, well, if they stop loving you and you love them, obviously it turns into more of an obsession, I guess, instead of love. I don't know, I mean, just sort of, I guess you sort of love them just because I don't think you really can believe inside you that they've stopped loving you, and therefore you might.
No, inside, where is the inside? There isn't any inside. There isn't any inside to life. It's all here, right around us, all the time. It's like one of those internets. I don't have, what is it, DSL, one of those that's open all the time. Isn't that what they advertise? It's always on. That's what life is like. There's no inside and outside. I mean, there's some that can be hidden or but in principle, nothing is hidden. Everything is there. So what do you mean inside? That person who has turned into a vegetable really loves you?
Well, as far as the vegetable goes, I think that you sort of, I guess you continue loving them just because you know that if they were better, the relationship would be as before. I mean, it's sort of a circumstance that's not too common.
So it's a hypothetical condition.
I'm just saying that it can be. I'm saying love is a two-way thing, but the problem is it's not the patient's fault that he doesn't love you. I mean, it's just that there were some circumstances that caused him to not be able to perceive who you are or something.
Why do you think love is always a two-way thing?
Because I guess when you love someone, you care about them, and caring about them doesn't only mean you care about them because if something happens to them, something happens to you. You just care about them because it's just engraved, I guess, in your heart. I mean, I don't know.
No, but wait a minute. That's a one-way street.
Okay,
I
but
thought by a two-way street, I thought you meant that the object loves you back.
yeah. So if the object loves you,
Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Somebody who loves you back is different from love which is not reciprocated. These are different kinds of love, worth analyzing on their own, but I wouldn't want to say that only one is love and the other is not. That's why we talk about reciprocal love. And you might say that, oh, it's much better. Yes, but the other kind also exists.
okay. I mean, I just said it was mostly a definition problem. I guess I do agree that it's just for me it doesn't sit well with me to have love be such a wide gamma of things. I guess.
What are you against a wide-angled camera?
I don't know. It's the way I was. I guess the way my character developed. I'm not sure. I don't think you can just call love this and call love that and call love.
Well, you see, there is a practical consequence, and that's what comes out in Father Nota's paper against me. He says, I think of a love of things as an authentic love, whereas he says the only true love is love of persons, and that's because it's a reflection of spiritual love, religious love. So on his dogma, God loves us, and we attain love by emulating God, right? That's the traditional view. It's not very revolutionary, but it goes against ordinary language and falsifies the phenomenology and the whole structure of what we mean when we talk about love. Now, there is a difference in the sense that one might say when there are kinds of loves of things that isn't really love. So somebody says, I just love hamburgers, right? Well, that just means you like them very much, maybe even compulsively. My brother, when he was, I guess, an adolescent, he loved hamburgers so much he felt the need to cure himself, and the cure consisted in gorging on hamburgers to a point on one occasion when he became very sick of him, and that cured him. That was the end of it. After that, he didn't have a love of hamburgers. Well, one might say that he never really, he didn't have a love of hamburgers in the sense in which an artist loves his materials, because it was addictive and it was something that came out of him in a way that he wasn't comfortable with. But if I have a love of my computer, I don't feel that that's just liking my computer very much. It's a real, ongoing, deep, intimate relationship, so that you can distinguish among different kinds of love of things.
Well,
And maybe a lot of what I'm saying to you I've never written out because I didn't have any human beings to write them out for, and you're providing me that presence. You can do much better, I'm sure, by working at these ideas, or better, or going beyond them.
well, let me just off the bat right here. I think that the reason why I'm inclined to want to sort of narrow down what we mean by saying love is that when there is an interpersonal love, it's a very special thing. And if you say that, oh, you know, I love her, and I also love computers, and I also love bookcases, and I also love cars, and I also love freedom or whatever, it seems like you're kind of even though everybody knows that you mean them sort of, you know, everybody realizes that love of things is different from love of persons. It's just by subconsciously you're sort of just making your love for her and her love for you, you're making it less important because it's not
less
that
important.
rare.
Less important.
Yeah, because it's not that rare. I mean, okay, do you understand how I say? I don't know exactly how to say it.
Well, now you're getting back to the anecdote I told at a lecture in Canada, I think it was, that I report on in The Pursuit of Love, and a student afterwards said, do you love your wife as much as you love your dog? And I hadn't mentioned my wife and I hadn't mentioned my dog. And I flustered and said, well, my dog doesn't criticize me. And the whole great big auditorium, the whole audience burst out laughing. I didn't realize I had said something so funny and ridiculous. But once they laughed, I could turn to another question, and afterwards I felt very uncomfortable. I hadn't faced up to this. And then I do so in that chapter, which I gather most of you have forgotten by now, because you read it in The Pursuit of Love at the end somewhere. And what I end up with is the idea that among persons, there are different kinds. So loving a dog, who is a person, my dog for me was certainly a person. There are other dogs that I have more difficulties thinking of as persons. I look in their eyes and I don't know what's going on, but with my dog I always knew what was going on, and we communicated, and he had talents that I recognized and imagination of a limited sort, but still imagination, and so he was a person, more so than a zygote. So I'm not in favor of banning abortion because zygotes are called human. They're human, but it doesn't mean they're persons, and that's enough reason to kill them when persons are going to be harmed by not killing them. Nevertheless, my dog is not the same kind of person as my wife, and my love of her as a person couldn't possibly be the same as my love of him as a person. So then this is to be analyzed. Where do we draw the line between, how do we distinguish between them within the category of a love of persons as distinct from a love of things? So that's one complication. Why can't you recognize all three, and then all these qualifications you have be built into them in terms of different examples of each? Adriana hasn't had much chance to talk. You and Veronica both had your hand up at the same time.
Well, I was just going to say that we can love a person, we can love a thing, and we can love an ideal, but it's just a matter of setting our priorities. So a love of a thing doesn't necessarily need to undermine our love for a person.
Well, I agree to that, and I say something like that I'm not opposed to the setting of the priorities, but you shouldn't assume that for all people there is a fixed hierarchy the way the church does. Let's say I have a love of persons, and that's why I give money to Oxfam, which feeds starving people in Africa, for instance, in underdeveloped countries. And I feel, well, this is related to my love of persons. But I don't give much thought to them. And my son bought me a brand new, a kind of DVD that he recommends. And it was like a toy, as though a child getting a toy. And I loved this thing and still love it. I love it as a thing. It hasn't quite become a person for me yet. But that love, in some respect, for the moment at least, is greater than my love for the people whom I hope Oxfam is taking care of on my behalf. And then love of ideals varies, so that one has to show the variability for different people, for different times, for different situations of these loves. That's why the whole question of love is so complicated, and so little has been done by philosophers, because philosophers like to say yes or no. You know, symbolic logic is the basis of mathematics, and mathematics is a wonderful art form and has all sorts of practical ramifications in science and technology. But one reason is because this is all yes and no. You have to have that kind of yes and no mentality. The digital world is a yes and no world, isn't it? Or am I not right? Life is not like that. And my life is certainly not like that. So that I don't know what to do with priorities. I live in accordance with certain priorities as I have to confront them. But to set them up in a rigid way that an institution like a religion does means nothing to me. I certainly wouldn't want to impose that upon anybody.
No, I agree that they're not rigid and that they will vary from person to person, but I just said this because the fact that you love something else doesn't make your love for a person less special.
Well,
yeah. But if it's a hierarchy, it's less important in that respect. It's lower on the hierarchy.
Your love for thing.
Huh?
Yes.
All right, but therefore it is less important.
Well, if your love for the person is higher in priority, then the love for a thing doesn't
Well, but
really
the point
affect
is, you
it.
see, love for some persons. If someone said to me, "How can you be so overjoyed at your DVD player when there are all those starving people in Africa? How can you sit down watching the television while you're having a good meal and it's showing all of these innocent people in Iraq being killed because of the kind of war that's being waged? How can you tolerate that?" Well, apparently I'm not sensitive enough to the persons and don't have the same kind of love of them as I do in having a love of a good meal. And I think it's true of everybody. We are compartmentalized, and yet our feelings overlap in all sorts of interesting ways or important ways. Stavros?
well, I mean, you mentioned that you loved your DVD player, but you haven't personified it yet. Whereas your dog, you have personified. So this show,
I don't know that I've personified it. I think he is a person.
Okay,
I hope he personified me.
well, I'm not. I guess assuming I'm assuming that you have some.
I'd say he wasn't died. He was a person. Yeah.
So I mean, I'm assuming that you have some things that you've personified that you love that are things, though, and some that you haven't personified that you love. I guess I don't know if this is true.
Well, now you're getting closer to the use of loving things, which means liking very much.
I just wanted to say that just the fact that you actually distinguish between the love of, I don't know, A, which you've personified, and the love of B, which you haven't personified yet, as you mentioned about the DVD player, means that you believe that some love of things is more important, is deeper and more important than some other love of things.
Well, the love of my computer is more important because the computer responds to me. It learns my way of thinking. It contributes to it. When I misspelled something, when I go on to Google, my shrine, it will say, "Did you mean?" And if I misspelled it, you're familiar with that, right? And that's almost a kind of love that I can't find among many people. I mean,
But isn't that the computer just doing whatever it's automatically been programmed to do? It's not that it's doing it just for you, or like it says, "Oh,
No, it's
Pastor
a
Singer,
thing.
I'm now going to respond to you because I like you." It's just that's what it has to do.
No, it's
it has no choice.
personifying. It's personifying a thing. I'm not going to say that about human beings. Now, people who believe in AI, artificial intelligence, some of them, think that we are things, and their mission is to show how the brain works, and that is the mind. The mind is the working of the brain, and how if we only could figure it all out in terms of the chemical, physical, and behavioral scientific elements, cognitive elements, we'd know all there is to know about a human being. A human being is not a person in a sense different from what ideally an artificial intelligence could provide. Now there are also modifications. Some say no machine will ever duplicate a human being, but it will be able to perceive human feelings and respond to them as a machine can. But we ourselves are not just machines. This is, again, one of that irresolvable areas, and I'm happy to live in ignorance whether we will ever be able to reduce consciousness to bodily materiality. Because consciousness seems to be different, but we know how much it depends upon the body. Is it not a problem, the way some philosophers say, because there's no way of reducing one to the other? Or is it simply a matter of cognitive science advancing enough, and then there'll be nothing left in that empty category of person? It'll all be reducible to things. And then I want to know, what is the nature of the concept of reducibility? So it's still in great flux, and I don't feel troubled. I don't feel the need to try to reduce it or not to reduce it. That may be a limitation for me. For that reason, most philosophers in America probably aren't interested in my work. That's all right. I have things I think I can do, and I want to do it, but it doesn't require me to solve this kind of problem, or to solve any problem. Well, the problem is how to be imaginative, creative, intelligent, communicative, so that others understand me, in the formulating of my distinctions as pluralistically as possible. That's a big problem. But as you see, it's a very different order of problem from the other one.
I don't know. I guess I just wanted to say that because I guess going back to my former point, that because you distinguish, you personify some things and you don't personify some other things, but you love them, and you realize that your love of computer is more important than your love of, I don't know, the bookcase, for instance, that in fact you are doing what Adriana said, because you are making a some sort of hierarchy of love.
Right.
So,
why don't we stop here? Veronica's going to give the presentation next week, and I look forward to it. And we've, thrashed through enough today to count as a very full menu for you to work on, to think about, unless somebody wants to say something further. All right, then why don't we stop for today?